Welcome to Explore, Explain, Highlights. In this Highlights package, we'll be discussing Season 2, Episode 6, with our guest, Alvin Chang, discussing their project, We Can Draw School Zones to Make Classrooms Less Segregated.
It doesn't feel like a kind of a gotcha piece where you're really trying to sort of scandalize certain areas and say, look how bad these people are, look how wrong that is there. It feels kind of calmer. It feels slightly more educational, informative, but not really necessarily, sort of shaming certain, as you get committees, certain counties, certain districts. Again, was that a conscious tonal choice or position that you wanted to kind of pursue?
Yeah, I go back and forth on this. The Tampa Bay Times did an article on their the way that those attendance zones were gerrymandered in, I believe, a county called Pinellas, and theirs was an investigative piece. It was a gotcha piece because the school board purposefully did this. So I go back and forth, but I think the way I approached this entire series was the way we collectively think about the American education system as this great equalizer. I mean, I think that's kind of outdated now, but the great equalizer, or the that we just kind of lucked into our situation. I think a lot of that is kind of misguided. I think because we still think that we're responsible for most of our own successes rather than being sorted into them. So I think for me, this was a introspection opportunity for both me and for my readers to say, okay, let me recontextualize what I've been through. I kind of think of it as a like when you're watching a movie and it's got a big twist at the end, and the twist doesn't tell a whole new story, but rather it recontextualizes everything you've just seen for 2 hours. And I think for me, that's a really powerful moment every time that happens to me, and happens a lot. And I think I wanted that experience for the reader to be able to say, whoa, I remember driving 2 minutes that way and there was a whole different neighborhood and those kids went to a different school. And I want you to kind of think about those experiences rather than making it about a whole other universe that you don't quite relate to, that gotcha universe. And I think, I think it could have been a gotcha story, but I also think I value the introspection a lot. So this, this is now my sixth or seventh employer in a very similar type of job, and every time I have found that it's hard to find collaborators on a project like this where you're not just the tech help or the design help. Right. And I've worked really hard and spent a lot of professional energy to not be the database guy or the guy who does this thing. I'm driven by my curiosity. I'm driven by finding answers and to think through things visually rather than, I'm less interested in taking some finding that I haven't really been curious about and visualizing that, doing the last however many miles of that work. And so I love collaborating when I find people who can come in with kind of an open mind in terms of what our roles are going to be, because I think that's really fun. A lot of times in under-resourced newsrooms, I think if you can open up Illustrator and do something, if you can code something, if you can design something, I think you end up being the person who takes on a lot of the technical load. So do I like working alone? I can work alone. I've learned to do it and learned to be extremely organized and have extremely good deadline meeting skills so I can do it. And I've learned to self-edit. So a lot of times my editors aren't visual or data people. So I've learned to self-edit on that front. Is it ideal? No. But can I produce something publishable by myself with an editor who doesn't have a data or visual background? Usually.
Yeah.
But collaboration is great. Collaboration
of course.
is some of the most rewarding projects, especially when everyone comes in with kind of an open mentality of, I'll contribute and learn and be curious along with you. And then the other thing I didn't expect to do was to have to explain the scatter plot that that you're about to see. There's an entire section of the piece that explains the scatter plot that you're about to see and how to interpret it before you even get to it. And I've never done that before. I've never, built into a piece, here's how you should read the scatter plot. And it says something like, if this slope gets greater, then it shows a little cartoon figure falling off the slope, then this is bad. If this slope gets flatter, then this is good. And it's such a silly exercise, but I was rereading it again today, and I thought, I'm glad I did that for myself, because I think if I just got to the scatter plot, I would have no idea how to interpret this without some thinking. So one thing I've been thinking about is, how do these pieces change the way we see the invisible things in our world? And how can I visualize those invisible things? And so for that top image, I just thought, well, hell, I'll just draw walls around a neighborhood. I mean, what's more visible than that? And this was kind of amidst the whole Donald Trump wants to build walls kind of thing. And I just thought, what's the difference between these invisible walls versus, real walls? There really isn't a ton.
What ideas were emerging when you first set out for this? And is what we see now consistent with the initial sketch, wireframe, post-it notes, I don't know, kind of bookmarks from other kind of works that you've done that you thought, I'm going to try and kind of capture the essence of that? What were the kind of initial, almost mental visualizations you had about this piece before you even sort of put it all together?
Yeah. So for this piece, I knew it would be a long form visual, piece with these signature cartoons in there, scattered throughout. The thing I knew the tone I wanted to convey was, both playful, personal, both systemic and personal, which is such a tough balance, I think. And especially with the stuff that I've covered, a lot of it is systemic, personal, serious, playful. It's a combination of all of it. So I kind of knew what this would look like. The part that changed up on me was there's a middle of a piece that starts to change. The body copy starts to change when you input your school district.
Right.
And it kind of contextualizes what you're about to see. And I didn't expect to do that because, that feels... I don't like doing that. I don't like changing body copy on interaction. And as I read through the piece over and over, I started to realize, you need to customize some body copy for people based on what kinds of maps they're seeing, because it makes a huge difference in how you're going to transition to the next thing and the next thing and the next thing.
The range, just touching back briefly about the range of different charts and devices that you use. We've got choropleth maps, line charts, histograms. We spoke about the scatter plot before. Waffle charts as well. Were you at any point considering other charting methods? Maybe even you spoke about the scatter plot and the potential graphical literacy issues that come with that. Were there any other even more adventurous chart types that you sort of considered deploying, but then thought maybe not, we'll stick to this kind of core group?
The choropleth at the top, I thought, maybe because if you see the difference between the neighborhoods and the school districts, I thought this isn't very drastic. Some of them are just, you can't quite tell what's happening. And I played around with a bunch of different ways to maybe show certain areas that are getting more segregated or whatnot. And the moment I started showing it to people, they said, I just want to see the map. Can you just show me the map? And I thought, okay, fine. That gets back to the point of, this is about you and what you know and what you're familiar with. And when you see some of these slight differences in the places that you grew up, it means a lot to you. And that was the same for me in the districts that I had lived. And so that was the one that I wrestled with a lot, because when I look at most of those maps, I don't see a story, except when I go to my hometown.
Right.
Thank you for joining us for this Explore, Explain highlights episode. As always, the full episode is available on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. We hope to see you again soon on another episode of Explore, Explain.